Well, this morning we'll be chatting with the president of CCUL, the Co-operative Credit Union League, Mr. Joseph Remy, and also the manager, Ms. Dianne Joseph, on the topic of the compliance program as it relates to credit unions. To tell us more information, I'll invite Mr. Remy. What is this all about?
Okay. Trinidad and Tobago subscribed to the Anti-Money Laundering and Counter-Financing of Terrorism Act and regulations as dictated by the international agencies, which is FATF, and then we have CFATF, which is the Caribbean Financial Task Force. And as such, we have to subscribe to those. They consider us to be part of the financial landscape. And as such, credit unions have been subjected to the provisions of the AML and CFT laws and the regulations. And as such, we have developed a robust compliance program that allows for credit unions to make sure that they are in line with what the laws provide for. What has happened is that the League, as the parent and the umbrella body, organizes program training and development activities for all the credit unions that is under the umbrella of the League to ensure that there is a continuous awareness and appreciation and application of the laws and the regulations. And we have been working with the FIU over the years in terms of ensuring that our compliance program are consistent and are in line with what the regulations provide for. And this compliance roundtable program that we had last week was one in the series of initiatives that the League would have developed to ensure that we keep all our compliance officers that are required by law to be present at credit unions fully accurate with the provisions of the regulations and look at some of the challenges that they are having as compliance officers to see how we could keep developing them to ensure that they continue to be in line with the laws.
Okay, and Ms. Joseph, would you say that the efforts that you all have made have been successful so far? And tell us a little bit about the training aspect of it. What types of services do you provide? I know he mentioned, Mr. Remy mentioned training for the credit unions to ensure that they understand the importance of these rules. How responsive have they been as well?
Very responsive. In fact, in specifically speaking to the issue of AML and CFT and compliance for compliance officers, we implemented as an organization a shared services platform. And because of the complications and the expensive nature of AML and CFT and putting this entire compliance program and training in place, we developed this shared services platform where the League oversees the compliance training. And it has been successful in that compliance officers and organizations, credit unions that is, and also the motor vehicle sector to a large extent and non-financial cooperatives have been getting their compliance needs very much in order. They have their compliance programs and they have their training of board and committees and their respective members of staff trained. I think what is one of the challenges, however, is the way the law is structured and interpreted or applied by the regulators in the context of we have credit unions from very small to extra large. And in the case of a very small credit union, sometimes you have one member of staff, or you may have a company-based credit union run by the volunteers because that is the system and structure under which credit unions operate. But based on the regulators' requirement, they will ask for a compliance or an alternate compliance officer. And if you have one person, then you can only have a compliance officer, you cannot have the alternate. And the pressures or burdens that are put upon the credit union is what is of concern to us. Or in the case where you have a credit union managed and operated by volunteers, and you are saying to those credit unions that you require a compliance officer at management level, when there is none. There are volunteers running it. And for some reason, the regulators are not seeming to understand the structure and how credit unions operate, so that they are putting burdens and writing letters and intimidating, for want of a better word, the smaller credit unions.
And Mr. Remy, how have the credit unions been responding to this added pressure?
Well, they have resorted to the League because we are responsible for advocating for and on their behalf. And they are raising serious concerns with us because what it will eventually do is to push these credit unions off of the radar. And as such, we are taking strong umbrage, as Ms. Joseph said. to the fact that the cooperative development trust in Trinidad and Tobago, to us particularly now, is most relevant in these challenging economic times. And the more credit unions you have, the more you encourage savings and thrift in terms of how we deal with economic situation. And as such, pushing credit unions away is not the best way to go. So we at the League have taken up the responsibility to stand up in defense of those credit unions and raise, from a diplomatic perspective in the first instance, what we consider to be the non-appreciation of the unique structure of cooperative credit unions. And as a result, the fact that the regulatory regime for credit unions ought to be fundamentally different to those of other financial institutions because of the structure and because of the unique nature and because of our social trust also in society. We have to be considered differently. It's not that we don't want regulations, but we believe that how you structure the regulations ought to be different for credit unions. And the League is advocating to the FIU that the approach with respect to the rigid application of the compliance officers and the alternate compliance officers in certain instances cannot apply because of the fact that some of those credit unions, as Ms. Joseph said, are voluntarily run. They are run by persons who have given up their time and effort because that is the genesis of the cooperative movement. That is where cooperativism takes its root in terms of volunteerism, and as such, we can't see a credit union, some small credit unions, some of them belong to religious bodies that has, let's say, about 200 members and are run by volunteers, are now required to have a compliance officer and an alternative compliance officer paid, which will take to us, give them a challenge in terms of the operational expenditure. And in addition to that, you know, it pushes the credit union in a particular space with respect to abiding by those regulations and shifting the focus away from what the core intent of the credit union is. And as such, we verily believe that something has to be done differently relative to how those credit unions operate. They are on board with us at the League. They have come to us. We have given the commitment to air their views and take it to all the respective authorities to have it addressed, and is that the League is about to do.
So you're saying that you have been taking strong umbrage in your words. So have you met with this body? Have you been discussing the way forward? How have they been responding?
Well, we had some meetings with the FIU last year and the year before. Unfortunately, those meetings are not as regular as they ought to be. We wrote the FIU last year again, seeking an intervention. They have not responded appropriately to our request, and we are going to make another approach, and then we are going to approach the Minister of Finance, the Central Bank, all the authorities we believe are required to sit with us and talk about this whole situation. One thing we want to let them know is that the cooperative credit union movement, consistent with its mantra, is always prepared to abide by the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. But what we would want to ensure is that the laws are not so oppressive that it pushes credit unions away from the financial and social landscape. And we are going to write the FIU again. We are going to air it with the respective authorities, and we are hoping that good sense will prevail and that we'll be provided with a forum to sit and discuss this matter in the best interest of all parties.
Ms. Joseph, Mr. Remy mentioned that you're required to have a compliance officer. There are certain requirements being put forward to these credit unions. What else is required of the credit unions?
They are required to have their annual training and retraining of all board committees and every level of staff, and we have been doing that. They are required to follow their compliance program, and they have been doing that. They're pretty good in following the compliance requirements. I think what is being applied in the credit union system is a one-size-fits-all, and that will not work for us. For example, we are required to have the compliance program, and initially, that program was to be approved by the FIU. And then they told us, no, it can now be approved by the board. And when the board approved the compliance program in line with the laws and regulations, and inside of there, insert the required policies and procedures to follow that compliance program, in some cases, after approval by the board, while it is legitimate and legal insertions into the compliance program, the officials of the FIU, when they go to the credit union, they are asking the credit unions to remove it. So you are in a never-ending circle of making adjustments. So today they tell you put this, tomorrow they tell you take it out. And the credit unions, some of them have to go to consultants or choose to go to consultants who charge very expensive to design and put these programs together. And each time you have to amend is a cost to the credit union. In addition to that, they are saying, well, you need to have audit done of the compliance portfolio. That's the external audit. And we are saying, well, yes to that, because they were opposing the league doing that. And we said, let's put a hold and see what happens. But then if you are saying to have auditors, and there's no fixed, there's a requirement in the financial obligation regulation. When we follow that requirement, there is an objection in some cases. But when you get to the FIU and you ask, do you have a list of auditors that we can go to and choose to do these audits for our credit unions? The answer is no. So I think the system and the structure going outside to treat with the credit unions from the regulator standpoint has to be strengthened, and there has to be collaboration and discussion at a closer level and more regular meetings with stakeholders like us, because we are the national umbrella body or the parent body as they call us. And if our credit unions come to us, we have an obligation to advocate on their behalf. So this is our call in terms of the compliance portfolio and AML and CFT.
Mr. Remy, you all recently had a compliance officers roundtable.
Yes, that's
When
right.
was this? Where was it? And who were among the invited guests?
It would have been last week.
Last week, Tuesday, the 20th.
At Campo's restaurant in Chagonas. And the featured speaker was Mr. David West, who is now the director of the Police Complaints Authority. But he would have been the first designated director of the FIU. And he would have been responsible for drafting of most of the regulations and the laws relative to AML and CFT. And he was very, very profound in his delivery. And what was interesting is that Mr. West indicated to us, that the importance of us abiding by the compliance laws and the programs, but at the same time ensuring that they are tailored and suited to the needs of the cooperative credit union movement. And we felt very satisfied with that session. We had compliance officers from over 36 credit unions present. And in addition to that, we had some of the board members of the league present also. And this is just the first part in a series of compliance programs that the league intends to run, because we want to ensure that at the end of the day, the credit union movement is in compliance with the laws of the land, but they are also structured, the laws are structured to ensure the development of cooperatives in Trinidad and Tobago. Remember, we have a cooperative development division, and the vision at that time was to see cooperatives develop throughout the length and breadth of Trinidad and Tobago, particularly because of the purpose that they serve and the social need that they satisfy. And as such, we would do whatever is necessary to ensure that that cooperative development trust continues throughout the length and breadth of Trinidad and Tobago.
Ms. Joseph, closing comments. Do you believe that this will be resolved soon?
We believe that it will be resolved. How soon, I cannot say, because we have been speaking and we have been communicating with the FIU over time. The challenge is that we would have been invited to stakeholder meetings every quarter, and for quite a while we have not been invited to any stakeholder meetings, so we are not sure whether there was any being held with us excluded or whether there's a hold on it. And as President Remy is saying, we will, despite the meetings or not, advocate on behalf of our members, and a solution is going to be there. How? At this point, we cannot say, but for sure, we will not advocate in vain.
Thank you so much. Such a pleasure having you all on this morning.
It was a pleasure again.